I'll be speaking to Shamsa Araweelo, who is a FGMC activist. She's also the founder of the Garden of Peace. She's also a motivational speaker. So I'll be speaking to Shamsa. Hopefully she'll be joining me shortly. So today's Instagram Live is going to be about FGM or FGMC, female genital mutilation, or female genital cutting, or female genital surgery, however you want to call it. It'll be a sensitive topic, so just to let people know in advance, I'll be speaking to Shamsa, who is a FGM activist, or FGMC activist, speaking about the work she's doing to educate people about FGM, helping women who have undergone this surgery, how they can still experience a fulfilling intimate life, as well as education she's providing and the counselling she's providing to psychologists, sex therapists, and policymakers. So hopefully Shamsa would be joining me shortly. She is a British Somali activist, inspirational speaker. She's got a serious story, which you might hear a little bit about, but I really want to hear more about the educational work she's doing in terms of trying to obviously eradicate FGM, and also helping women who have undergone the procedure, how they can still maintain and have a fulfilling sexual life. So there are a number of myths around FGMC, which hopefully Shams is going to help debunk, and obviously also educate and enlighten people who may not be aware of the various practices and various procedures that takes place not only in Africa but also parts of Asia, as well as even parts of Europe and America. So again, just for the benefit of those of you who are joining, I'll be speaking to Shamsa, who is a phenomenal speaker. She is a FGMC activist. She is also the founder of, I think she's also the founder of Garden of Nation, and also she's raising funds for a reconstruction surgery, which hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about. And again, all the information is either going to be on Shamsa's. Hello,
Ah,
how are you?
I'm
You,
good,
you
thank
made it.
you. How are you?
Very well, very well. You're looking well.
Thank you.
I like the red
So,
background.
yeah, we love it. We love it.
The fiery red. Yeah, great. Yeah, so just usually what I like to do when I'm starting, I try to very brief introduction, but I like to kind of ask the guests to kind of give a quick elevator pitch, just to kind of introduce themselves and the fabulous work that they're doing, and then we can get into the topic at hand. So do you mind giving a quick elevator pitch to let people know who you are?
I can try. I am known as Shamsa Araweelo. My actual legal name is Shamsa Sharawe. I am 30 years old now, but I've had experiences that I could have done without, including female genital mutilation and 3 other forms of honor-based violence. And it really shaped the way that I thought at the time. And living in trauma, you don't realize or see the world from a perspective that is good. I saw it from a negative perspective all my life, and I wanted to change that. I knew I needed to change that. And I knew that everybody had a purpose, and mine happened to be public speaking and activism, which I enjoy. I've always, gravitated towards people and helping people and justice, and that's what I do now. So it's, working with professionals, speaking daily with survivors, rescuing people from other countries like Somalia, for example, and ensuring if they are British citizens, bringing them back. My social media activism, it's, interviews, it's quite a lot, but it all surrounds honor-based violence, including female genital mutilation.
Well, and I think you undersold yourself a little bit there. So I'll say a little bit that I've seen, because I've been following Shamsa's work for over 2 years now. Great, phenomenal work that she's doing, brave work. She's been featured in Daily Mail. She's been featured in the Lad Bible, where I think over like 3 million views. She's been featured in various podcasts like Halfcast Podcast. She's all over the place in a good way in terms of spreading the light that she's kind of offering people. So as much as, she is a great speaker, she has been quoted and cited by various sources, both media, national sources and international sources. I just wanted to kind of let people know that this isn't someone that you're a big fish, shall we say, in this game.
Oh, I appreciate that.
But no, no, honestly, like I said, and we spoke yesterday because we were supposed to obviously have this live yesterday. We had a quick chat, and I'll just say what we can. Some of the stuff we spoke about yesterday. I first came across Shamsa's video, a really powerful video on her YouTube channel, and where she was talking about let's talk about sex, and she was talking about pleasure after FGM or FGMC, and debunking some of the myths that some people have, and we'll delve into a little bit about that later. But I really appreciated not only your knowledge, but also obviously your story as well. He was giving people hope. And I think that's very important, especially as Black people as well, that the narrative is often told from people speaking about our story. So it was refreshing to hear kind of like a powerful Black voice, a Black female voice. And again, just speaking about not only what you've gone through, but again, you're still kind of prospering and doing well for yourself. So yeah, just kudos to you on that. But just for the benefit of people who may not be familiar with then we've mentioned FGM and things. Do you mind explaining those terms are? What you just people kind of know what
I think in the countries that perform it, they have various names, various different names. But in the Western world, especially here in the UK, they refer to it as female genital mutilation. Internationally, is referred to as female genital cutting. In countries like Somalia, it has 3 different names. There's Sunnah, there's Guditan, and there's Hananes. Like I said, other countries have different names for it. And what it is a procedure that is absolutely, should be absolutely criminal. And it happens, this is the thing, when people, I can explain FGM very generically. So I can tell you that there are 4 types of FGM. Type 1 is the partial or full removal of the clitoris, which is the gland, not the actual clitoris because it's long and we know that. The second one is the removal, partial or full removal of the clitoris and the labia minora. And the third one is the removal of the clitoris, the labia minora, and the labia majora, which is the larger outer lip. And in all of those cases, they can also be sewn. But the one that the Western world definitely believes sewing happens is type 3. And that's the one that I experienced. The way that I experienced it was being held down by my own loved ones, my grandma, my aunties, my uncles. It was done by a villager, a old woman who has been doing it for years. That's her job, that's her profession. And it was a absolutely terrifying experience for me, because right there it installed a fear of they're trying to kill me. I genuinely believe that my family were trying to kill me, and I convinced myself at the age of 6 that this is what that is, you know, the lead up to my death. And because there is no explanation, there's no telling that child why this needs to be done, what exactly is the procedure. We just go there oblivious, and we either get held down, or in some cases it happens in hospital settings where the person goes under general anesthetics, or they're given general anesthesia and they are completely asleep and the procedure is done, but they still have a sense of trauma because now you don't know what has happened to you. You weren't awake to see it. You being told that you have parts of you missing, but you don't understand what that means. And in my case, I got to see it. I got to experience it. I was fully awake and like experiencing the pain as it came. And not only having to watch my own or having to experience my own FGM, but having to watch my sister and having to watch my cousin as well. So in that case we had a group of 3. In countries like Sierra Leone, they have countries of 10. In countries like Zambia, they have 20 or over, and it's more of a party, it's more of a celebration. In countries like, I always forget this country, Singapore, they don't necessarily, there are some who cut the clitoris, but majority don't cut and they prick. So type 4 is pricking, burning, stretching, any type of damage to the female genitalia comes under the 4th category. But FGM isn't as simple as 1, 2, 3, because none of these people are experienced enough or are experienced medically enough to do a precise and identical FGM on everybody that they have done it on. Each and every one of those women have had a completely different experience and a different type of FGM. So, for example, if it's type 1 FGM, there's category A, category B. The fact that in the UK we only have 4 categories, and they make it like it's that simple. It's not. You can have type B that have less things missing. You can have type 2 and have more things missing. You know, it varies on the culture, it varies on the people, it varies on the women, it varies on the age. So that's a little bit about FGM.
You referred to FGM and not the procedure. And I just wanted to kind of pick up on lots of many of you mentioned not really. Can you? I'm just interested in understand what it means in terms of
I think it's important to, like, we all know we live in a time where labels, depending on, you know, what type of label it is, can have a really damaging consequence for the people you're labeling. So when the label of mutilation came about, because before this it was known as female genital cutting. So when it was changed here legally as female genital mutilation, it was never supposed to be used on survivors, that term. You know, it is for doctors, it is for professionals, it is for officers to understand the severity of the situation, to understand that this is serious, to help the public knowledge understand the seriousness of female genital cutting. However, I am 30 years old. There is no way on God's green earth I will go to a doctor or speak to a teacher and refer to myself as mutilated. I already have, you know, lived with calling myself multiple names. I refer to myself as being a less of a woman. I felt less than. I felt like something was missing. I felt abnormal. I felt, you know, something was missing. But to accept the label of mutilation, I just can't do it. I can't do it. As a young woman, I can't relate to the term mutilation. I know it as cutting. That's what it is. That's what happened. Because realistically, if it's mutilation, who performs the actual cutting? Is a cutter. That's what we call them, cutters. So we don't call them mutilators. We call them cutters. And what happened to us is cutting. However, yes, mutilation is another word for cutting, but it just is more, you are looked at as if there's something wrong, like it's disgusting, like you are disgusting.
Yeah, I find that,
and I don't think that's right. It's not right for young women to be labeled mutilated.
No, I agree. I find it problematic. I think it's dehumanizing people, African people, when they use mutilation, especially in relation to African practices. But if there's genital practices in the West, it's maybe a cosmetic surgery. So it's just like the language. That's why I'm kind of troubled by that. Again, some people, they don't, some people say if you want to undergo that's fine, but I
Your
prefer
voice,
that.
your
So
voice, your
someone's
voice,
saying that the audience,
your
mine or
voice.
yours, sorry, the voice is breaking. So it's better now.
Repeat what you were saying.
Yeah, so I prefer someone saying the okay, let me so I prefer the term female genital cutting or female genital cosmetic surgery because it actually is actually surgery, one of the different types of surgical procedures that are undertaken. Now I understand why some people want to use the term FGM because they want to, in a way, I think maybe kind of scare people to say like this is like a horrific practice that needs to come to an end. I think on the other side, people focus on the procedure. It makes them feel like you mentioned, as if there's something missing. I think that's problematic to kind of use those terms because even if a woman has undergone female genital cutting, her pelvis is still intact and you can still climax.
Yeah.
So someone was asking about my audience. My voice.
So with the term female genital mutilation, I don't mind it as long as it's used in a professional setting. I think it's very triggering and very disrespectful to use that term with survivors and very degrading as well. And also, I don't know if many people know, but they used to use female genital mutilation in their terms here in the UK, I think in the 70s or 80s to treat hysteria, to treat mental
Yes.
health, to treat, women with heightened sexual desires. So the fact that we're acting as if it's something new is ridiculous. It's not new. It has existed in every single continent in the world. And it's just now it's more active within the Black community, and is not spoken about, especially within, the female, within the us women. We don't talk about it because we've been taught for so long to keep everything a secret and keep everything in, and just be strong and just live. And that's what we do. That's how we function. We listen to what everybody else says about our body. We listen to what everybody else says about our FGM and our sexual interactions and we should marry, and and it gets to a point where you believe it. You have FGM and you think, oh my God, I can't feel anything because an article said I can't feel anything. What? And to be honest with you, I convinced myself that I couldn't because I had FGM. And when I was married, it was exactly the way that I was thinking. I thought it was horrible. I thought it was discomfort. It was so uncomfortable, but I had to fake it basically for my husband. And the reason why I did that is because we are told not to express our needs. So I lived for a long time just not feeling anything. And then something in me changed. And I thought, how can I truly know what I feel if all I think is negative? So I changed my way of thinking about sex. I started thinking more positively about it. I didn't, even though I experienced sexual assault, and that doesn't help either, especially because I was a virgin when it happened as well. So I thought, like, the idea that a girl is supposed to keep her virginity and stay pure, and hence why the FGM took place. And when you experience sexual assault as a virgin, plus you have FGM, it makes you think, like, what value do I have? Like, do you not have faith in me? Like, you raised me with morals, and are you not confident in your own parenting? Because from the age of 6, you thought I was going to, be spreading my legs and, hopping into bed with everybody. Like, it was very degrading moments for me when my sexual assault happened. So again, that impacted my thinking towards sex. I hated it. I had nothing positive to say about it. But I started slowly changing my mind. I thought, you know what do I want? What are my needs? How can I figure out what is good for me and what wouldn't work for me in terms of my FGM? I know I can't change it, but what can and can't work for me? What do I like and don't like? And communicating it to my partner, because I'm sorry, I cannot focus on just your sexual pleasure. I was not put on this planet to just focus on one person's sexual pleasure and completely neglect my own. So with that positive thinking and with this change in my psychological thinking, I was able to orgasm. I was able to experience a lot, enough for me to be happy with it anyway. So, and then it made me think, how many survivors are convinced they can't feel anything, but the truth is they can. I was cut when I was 6, which means my vulva was very small. So if my vulva was small and not fully developed, whatever was cut is going to be, you know, maybe whatever is visible to them, right? So when they cut that and you are sewn together, you don't see what you have and you don't have. And what is really irritating for me is, although we have defibrillation in this country, we don't have reconstruction surgery. And defibrillation is they open you up, but they stop like right above your urination hole. So as soon as they see that, they stop. Because if they get to the clitoris and the clitoris hood is too sensitive and they can't fix it, so they would rather not touch it. So therefore, these women would have to continue believing that they don't have one because no one has opened them up to see whether they do or don't. There's no confirmation. They're just believing that they don't have.
So sorry, just to clarify, so with the relation that they practice, okay, it's just from the vaginal orifice just to the people you said. So they don't go further,
so if this is the vaginal hole, well, that's small. And here is the clitoris. They will open you up to your urination hole. They want that to be exposed so you are able to urinate properly. But they don't go above that. They don't open you up fully. Like, for example, like I said, I'm 30 years old. I have a 9-year-old child, and I'm still closed. And I live in this country. And again, even at my big 30-year-old age, it was only a few months ago that I found out that I could possibly still have a part of my clitoris.
Wow.
Because your clitoris cannot be fully removed. It's impossible. Unless they surgically open you fully up, it is impossible to remove the clitoris.
Am I losing it? Oh yeah, I'm really surprised in the UK they don't do open up fully because they probably don't tamper with the. Can you tell us where they do if do the clitoris reconstruction?
So I've heard that a lot of people do clitoris reconstruction. There's Spain, in Switzerland, I believe, in Germany, in Belgium, France, Australia, America. I don't know about Canada, but they do it in a few places. I know they do it in Egypt. I don't know if it's a real, like a full reconstruction surgery or just the clitoris reconstruction. But there are a lot of doctors that do it. But again, it's very important to do research when you're picking a doctor, because it is a very, very scary world that we live in. And a lot of doctors will have you believe they understand the female anatomy, but in fact, they don't. And I think it's really important.
I think you have to mute when you're speaking. Are we having the sound? Are we having sound? Okay, so when you're speaking.
Okay. So yeah, so they do it in a few countries, but the important thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is do your research. How many failed attempts have they had? How many successful attempts have they had? How many years have they been doing it? There's so much that you need to know, because there are doctors out there, as amazing as their intentions are, they have made the situation 10 times worse for survivors. So it is very important to choose the best of the best in this case.
Okay, I'm going to say, if you don't mind going on mute just for a second so I can quickly give a quick preamble. So just for the benefit of people during the last 10 to 15 minutes, I'm speaking to Shamsa. I want to pronounce your surname properly. Araweelo. Araweelo. You're on mute now, so I can't hear you. You're on mute. So I'm speaking to, yeah. How do I pronounce, I want to do justice to your surname. How do I pronounce your surname, please? You're on mute again.
I forgot. It's pronounced Araweelo, but it's not my real name. It's not my actual surname. It's my alter ego, you should say. She
So
was.
what do you just want to go with the one day? Okay, so I'm speaking to Shamsa. He's a phenomenal inspiration. You want to put yourself on mute? Sorry. Yeah, who's a phenomenal, inspirational, motivational speaker. She's a FGMC activist, and we're using the terms interchangeably, FGM and FGMC activist. She's been featured on various media platforms, from the Daily Mail to Lad Bible, where she's her stories reached over like 3 to 4 million viewers worldwide. She's an educator, a mentor. She's also the founder of the Garden of Peace. She's empowering girls and women to let them know, to understand their body, and obviously the importance of female sexual pleasure. And she's also debunking some common myths that people have about the female anatomy, about some of the genital cutting practices that are carried out in Africa, and also raising awareness. So obviously, hopefully we can eradicate the practice, as well as letting, again, people who are educators, whether they are therapists, psychologists, and people that are giving assistance to people who maybe have undergone different procedures. They have the appropriate language, and they're not dehumanizing people, especially Black women. So she's a powerful voice. I wouldn't want to limit you and say you're a powerful voice in the Black community, or you're a powerful voice in the world's human community. So I appreciate Shamsa sharing her story. I didn't want to go into too much of her story because she's spoken about on various platforms, and I think she's more than said enough. I think I'm more concerned or interested in hearing more about the educational work she's doing and the mentoring work, and then we'll talk a little bit about the clitoral reconstruction surgery that she's raising funds for. So, yeah, forgive me if people wanted to hear more about her story, because I think, again, there's various platforms that you can hear about it, where she spoke about it in detail. But I really want to hear about, again, more about the educational and the mentoring work that she's doing for people. So can we touch on a little bit about the GoFundMe that you're raising campaign, and obviously can give details about what that entails and where people can find it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing. So we need to plug that. If you can talk about that, please.
I appreciate that. So the GoFundMe is, I think, on all my platforms apart from YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And it is for my reconstruction surgery. I suffer and have been suffering from severe nerve damage, especially for the last 2 years, because I started physically tearing. And it has been one of the most difficult stage in my life, because I am prevented from doing a lot. I have struggled physically and mentally, because again, there's no healthcare in this country. I was actually told by a doctor that no doctor in this country would touch me because I'm an FGM survivor, and because they can see my, the urination hole. So therefore, no one can do anything for me. And I had absolutely no choice. Actually, I did. I had two choices: to suffer in silence and continue to live in pain and discomfort, or take matters into my own hands, and made the informed decision to go to Germany and meet an amazing doctor who has had 15 years worth of experience, has done surgeries on multiple women, all of which were successful. And yeah, so I was supposed to have the surgery on the 29th of this month. It was scheduled in for July. However, because I wasn't able to raise the money, or all of it anyway, I had to reschedule because I didn't want to take the space from someone else. So now they are finding me a date for November, December, hopefully giving me enough time to raise the money so I can be free of pain.
And yeah, so please, if people, yeah, I've donated myself. I'm not someone who's just going to talk about or vouch for someone for people to donate if I haven't donated. So, you know, by all means, please donate, because to support the work that you're doing, I think it's the least that people can do. And again, if people want to find full details, if you click Shams, I'm sure you can. Yes, if you click Shamsa's go to IG, the link is in her bio, so you can find out more about the procedure, and it's fairly straightforward to donate, and obviously you can share it amongst friends, family, and loved ones. So now, someone actually asked a question. I don't mind. I mean, if you don't mind answering, they were asking, what are the reasons that female genital cutting is carried out in Somalia? I think you touched on that.
So there are multiple reasons, and it's almost identical, even though the cultures are so different and the people are very different and the countries are very different. The reasoning is almost identical. So purity is a big thing, to keep them pure, to make sure that they remain virgins, so that they are marriable, because men were saying they will not marry an uncut woman. There's also a reason to decrease a female's pleasure, and to prevent sex before marriage or sexual assaults. And some say that it is a religious reason for the cutting, but there is nothing about Islam, Christianity, or Judaism that allows female genital mutilation.
Well answered. Well, something I just want to add on that is, so I studied, I went to Egypt for a few years after I graduated from university, and I'm sure obviously you're aware that female genital cutting is very prevalent in Egypt. And when I was attending like some of the classes, a lot of the sheikhs and they will talk about how in the West, because women haven't undergone any genital cutting, that they're promiscuous and they're loose and this, that, and the other. Whereas they were talking about our pure women, obviously they're referring to at that time, obviously in Egypt, because they're circumcised, that's why they're not promiscuous. So it was quite interesting to, like, again, obviously I don't agree with what they were saying, but in countries where genital cutting is the norm, if you haven't undergone different forms, then you'll kind of feel like you're abnormal, or you're shaped, or you have like extra body parts than you should have. So even like in Nigeria, there's different types of genital cutting which is carried out. It's normally type 1 and type 1 and type 2, but it's normally type 1. In some parts, in some tribes where it's carried out, again, some of the reasons is because it's believed that it will help, it will decrease a woman's sex drive, so she won't sleep around. But also some look at it as it's a form of beautification. I don't know if you've come across that. They look at, like, if a woman's got an external clitoris, they said it resembles a penis, a phallus. That's why they want to remove it. So they said it feminizes the woman. And they said likewise with the man, when he undergoes circumcision, it emasculates the man as well. It makes the man more manly. So it's just interesting that different cultures have their different views in terms of like genital cutting practice and why they do it. And like you mentioned earlier, and I'm glad you did mention that, genital cutting was also practiced up until recently in Europe and in the USA. So as much as people think it's just only happens in Africa, like you mentioned, Shamsa, it happens in Southeast Asia, like in different parts, like Singapore, as well as like in Europe and America. But the difference is they call it like medical terms like clitoridectomy or female circumcision. But when it's different practices are practiced in Africa, it's FGM, and that's just the only thing that I'm just I want a bit of balance and have a bit more respect. So, okay, if you were trying to eradicate a practice, you still need to kind of understand the culture and speak to people without trying to dehumanize them. And like you said, labeling these people as like mutilators when some of those people, as far as they're concerned, they think this is a good practice for different reasons. So I'm glad you kind of laid that out. So I want to ask another question. I want to quickly get to it, but actually, before we come to the other person's question, what would you like? I've heard you say, I can't remember what platform, about like this topic is not really known or spoken about enough in the Black community. What would you like? How could the Black community support more of like to raising awareness and trying to eradicate the practice? What more do you think we could do? Oh, sorry, you're on mute. You're muted.
I said there's a lot that they can do. They can even educating yourself is the first thing, because in order to educate anybody else, you need to know what it is that you're talking about. You need to be providing the right information. So educate your inner family. Educate yourself first, then your family, then your inner circle, maybe your work colleagues. But the education cannot stop and start with just us. We can't consume this information and just keep it to ourselves, whilst there are girls who are being held down and cut right now as we speak. Maybe not now because it's late, but tomorrow there's a girl that will be cut. Not even just one, hundreds of girls will be cut. So it's doing research on your country, whether it exists in your country. Like, I was having a conversation with someone on TikTok live, and it was a Black man. And I remember when he came on, he said, it doesn't happen in South Africa. And although there are traces in South Africa, and also be reminded that if the country that you are from doesn't practice it per se, there are people who are migrating to that country who do practice it. Hence why it's such a big issue here. Not because they stopped practicing it, but people came from other countries that are practicing it. Hence why they had to make a law to say this is a crime and this cannot happen here. So it's understand the history of your country, because this guy said to me, it doesn't happen in South Africa, girls are not cut, but they stretch the girls' genitalia. And I said, I knew that happened, but I have never heard someone confirm it for me. And he said, yeah, it happens to enhance the woman's pleasure. So we need to understand half of the country is stretching female genitalia and the other half is cutting. There has to be a time where the continent of Africa realizes that these practices cannot continue in 2023 and onwards. It should not be a practice in the time that we live in. It should have never been a practice ever. But I'm hoping that the younger generation, my generation and younger, are able to change things, because I feel like they are. Their minds are changing. They're evolving. They have the internet now. There are tiny villages. I was on TikTok yesterday, and I'm writing a book, and I wanted to find, a video of my hometown, my small little village I grew up in, and I found it. And if I was so stunned, how did you get internet in Mokokuri? And they have Wi-Fi, they have access to the internet, they're able to learn things. They are able to change their minds and change the minds of people around them the same way their minds were able to be influenced. They have the power to influence other people's mind and say, actually, no. But men also play a massive, massive, massive part in ending FGM, because the reality is they started it. So the fight should be for survivors and the rest of the world. But for men, they have to back this fight with chest. The same way they said we will not marry a girl that is not cut, they now need to go back and say, we don't want our women cut.
Yeah, very, very, very well. I mean, on um, the point you mentioned about, I really agree with that, about people need to understand their different cultures and different practices, because, like you mentioned, like in South Africa, although female genital cutting might not be prevalent, but they have different, like you said, like the labia elongation, and that's very popular or common in Southern Africa, parts of like Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya, where it's kind of seen as a form of beautification. And even like the famous story of what's the lady's name? Sarah Bartman, you know, the lady that was trafficked from South Africa and brought to Europe and traded like on, she was shown like all these like freak shows where they were looking at her like large buttocks. They're also amazed by her elongated labia as well. And they were talking about, because again, she was from Southern Africa and that was a normative practice. And then they were comparing her genitalia compared to the white Europeans. But again, what I didn't like was, because obviously it was this white physicians, scientists talking about it, they were labeling a woman with elongated labia. They called it labia hypertrophy, which is like an abnormal condition. And then they call like a woman with a large buttocks tetraplegia, and they called it again abnormal because in comparison to the white European woman. And it's not that, again, taking aside the elongating the labia, but it's not that if a woman's got a naturally elongated labia that something's wrong with her, but because they're comparing it to like the white European ideal, they label it as a dysfunction. And that's something that, again, I'm trying to push back on even when I speak to gynecologists and urologists, is that some of these labels, they're inherently racist. Like I said, to call someone a woman because she's got large buttocks, to say that she's got tetraplegia, mean abnormal fat. If you go to most parts of Africa, especially Black Africa, it's normal for a woman to have like wide hips and large buttocks. And for us, for men, well, those of us who like women, it's a beautiful thing. But in Europe, they were seen as this is something that's disgusting. But then it comes to who is controlling the narrative or who's labeling something that's not beautiful and what's not beautiful. So, yeah, I do agree with the point you mentioned about people need to understand their respective cultures. With men, if I'm honest, so when I speak to men, like in, one-to-one or like close circles, because a lot of men won't publicly comment, but they want to see, and a lot of men are oblivious. Like I speak to men from both West Africa, East Africa, America, who have had or are in relations with women who've undergone various genital cutting practices. A lot of men are oblivious to it, if I'm honest, from my experience speaking to them. And if they knew, I think they would want to eradicate it, especially when they're wet. You're rolling your eyes. You don't believe that. You're rolling your eyes.
It's something there. Because, I don't know what it is, but it's like your mother-in-law when your ex-husband or your husband's done something and they're like, oh, he's just a man, he's they're not as smart as us. So I don't know. They would kind of dumb down his part, right? And act like he didn't know. They know. Men, I'm sorry, but this is the woman. You are marrying these women. These are your daughters.
But a lot of men don't even know what clitoris looks like.
Responsible. Like, for example, in Egypt, I think it's 83% to 90% of women are cut. Where were their fathers? Where were their brothers? Where Nigeria, I think it was under 12%. Where was their families? Where was the community? In Somalia, 99%. Where were the 99% of the fathers? And the funny thing is, men can't say, oh, we didn't know, or we didn't, you created it. It's because they traded with Egypt. It wasn't women that was trading with Egypt at the time. Almost every country that traded with Egypt took that ideology back to their African country and decided to subject it to their women. These were choices of men. These were brothers. These were fathers. These were, future husbands who were saying, actually, we won't marry a woman who is not cut. So for African men, they cannot in any space say they're oblivious or they didn't know, because and if you don't know, then that's crazy to me, because I'm pretty sure either your wife, your sister, or your mother, or your grandmother, or your auntie is cut. And with that knowledge, how can how can you say, oh, I didn't know? What do you mean?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is the reason why I'm taken by what they're saying. The reason why I believe a lot of them they genuinely didn't know is because it's seen as that's like a woman's issue. So maybe the fathers might again, maybe the father might say, you having relations with a woman, a lot of men don't even like going down and looking at a woman's genitalia to start off with anyway. So they're just concerned with maybe how it feels. And some men have this warped, mentality or this idea that like as if they're going to war with the vagina. So even if they're really going hard, for them it's like, okay, now I know that she hasn't been with anyone, and they are pleased with that, and that's a problem. But that's like a mentality as well. So that's and but then also in the West they did also have a similar tradition. I don't know if you're familiar with what's it called again? The husband stitch.
Can I just say, someone said, wait, what did she say? One person said, blame the mothers who forced their daughters to change their bodies for male approval. Someone else said the men know basically, and they ignore it, but the mothers are the ones who advocate for it. But what people need to understand is these women have been brainwashed for centuries. Okay, this wasn't something that she woke up one day and thought, oh, you know what, I want to cut my daughter's vagina. No, this is something that was programmed from generation to generation to generation, and there was no stopping it. It became so embedded into culture that even men got to a point where they could just, turn a blind eye, because it became part of the culture. It became a women's issue. It became something that is not openly spoken about. And women were put in control of making sure that they have good husbands for their daughters. Majority of these women come from countries that are really poor. In order for you to have status, money, anything is if you marry your children off to good people, wealthy people, majority of the time. So yes, it is a trade-off for the approval of men, but who put it there? So I hate the blame game. I don't blame mothers and I don't blame fathers. They are equally responsible for the trauma that they have caused to their children. Whether that be ignorance, whether it be you had education and you just decided, you know what, this is my culture and I'm going to do it regardless. They both have parts to play. We can't vilify either.
No, you're right. I wasn't trying to. When I was saying that, I think a lot of men are ignorant about it. I wasn't putting the blame on women, so I don't want that to come across as that's the case. I'm just.
I meant in the comments, people saying right. The women who are seeking the approval of men. Let's not blame the women. Let's not do that. Okay, we're not doing that.
There's a couple of questions that I just wanted to kind of. So the first questions someone asked. I'm trying to lost it. Okay, let me see if I can get. So does anyone know where it originated from? I've heard some say ancient Egypt. There is actually a story, and again, I'm just saying this is a story that is quoted, where there's a famous Muslim scholar called Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, who was from the 14th, 13th century, and he wrote a book and he spoke about like genital cutting for both men and women, and he mentioned that where it originated from was Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and his wife Sarah. They got into a dispute. No, sorry, Sarah got into a dispute with Hajar, his other wife or concubine, or however you want to call it, and Sarah became so jealous of Hajar that she said, I'm going to make an oath that I'm going to mutilate you, or something along those lines. So because Ibrahim said, this is the story, I'm not saying this is true, but this is what's narrated, and this is what I've read. Because Sarah made this oath, like she swore by Allah that I'm going to mutilate some parts of Hajar's body, then he said, okay, you can mutilate the ears and the genitalia. And this is a story. So that's where he said it originated from. Now, that the authenticity of that story, I don't believe it's actually true. But these are some of the kind of like the myths that you kind of, and it's perpetuated, unfortunately. And some of these myths are like the curse of hand myths. Some of them are perpetuated even by some well-respected Muslim scholars, and they are in even like some classical books. So again, I'm not saying that's the truth, but that is kind of like what some people kind of say. Did you want to add on that? Because I think many of
Oh my God, I did. FGM actually predates both Christianity and Islam. It started, it is suspected or thought to have started in Egypt, where they used to mutilate, well, I don't think you can mutilate a dead body, but they used to do it on dead bodies. And then they transitioned to mutilating or cutting, sewing together female slaves to prevent them from running off and, you know, having sex. So they could be sold for a higher price, their virginity can be confirmed. They're not, you know, gonna run away and get married. And then again, like I said, every country that traded with Egypt, whether Christian or Muslim, took that back to their own countries. And at first, I think they did it to slave women, and then slowly transitioned to, maybe that was their karma, but it transitioned to the rest of the country.
lovely. Was there another question? Make me feel this. Okay, that's just a comment. Women have experience. Okay, that's a comment. Okay, someone's asked or said, some people think it's the sunnah, but it's not. Okay, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
I
you
think
mentioned that. The hadith, or the hadith that you mentioned, is one that is heavily misunderstood, is one that is heavily weaponized when it comes to female genital mutilation. There are a few that are actually weaponized when it comes to women, Muslim women. But the FGM one has never been authenticated. The Prophet Muhammad Wasallam's daughters were never cut. His wives were never cut. And the hadith is the practice of the Prophet. And if he didn't practice it, we don't practice it. So this idea that, you know, he said, okay, it's ridiculous, and it hasn't been authenticated. So a lot of it is the responsibility of Islamic leaders, Christian leaders, Jewish leaders to say, actually, this is wrong. Because if someone is so devoted to religion and you tell them, you know, and they are undereducated, they can't read, they can't write, but they have memorized the Quran, for example, you know, they don't have the full understanding of what they are reading. They don't have, so for example, there could be an Arabic word that can mean different things. So the way that you interpret it might be completely different. So it's their responsibility to educate the right way. And I don't think that is something that they are doing. And I'm truly disgusted the fact that Islam is still being weaponized to commit this sort of crime.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, very well said. I think yeah, one of the issues, like you said, I think it's important that, you know, the Muslim like leaders and scholars and stuff get involved and not afraid to kind of broach this topic. And like you mentioned, there are a number of hadith that are weaponized, especially against Muslim women, unfortunately. Now, those hadiths in question, there are like about 3 or 4, and as you mentioned, a number of hadith scholars have said that they're not authentic. But one of the challenges, and one of the reasons why people will advocate for female circumcision, I'll call it, not FGM, is because amongst like the 4 traditional schools of law, the madhahib, all of them acknowledge the hadith. So because they acknowledge it, a number of the scholars, some said that you can do it, but you don't have to, like it's mukarrama, like it's honorable. Some said it's wajib. Now, the scholars that say that it's wajib, those scholars, the Shafi'i madhab, majority of their followers are in East Central Africa and also in Southeast Asia, and that's why, like, you see it's practiced in like Singapore and Malaysia, Indonesia. But scholars have different interpretations of that particular hadith, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, "Ida khafiti ashimi la tunhiki," like, cut lightly but do not cut excessively. So some scholars just interpret
That's the thing. There's another interpretation
it's,
where apparently he said to take a pin and to like prick.
yeah,
You know
so
how
this,
type 4 pricking, to prick and draw a little blood. But how do you take pricking to mean cutting?
no, so this is what I'm coming.
It doesn't make any sense. So even if
Yeah,
you wanted to make the hadith an authentic one and say that it's authentic, it doesn't say cutting. It doesn't say remove. It doesn't say it doesn't use any of those words. So this is what I mean. I can send you a text message now and you could read it completely different to the way that I meant it. That's because that's your perception of the way you read it.
100%. And this is where actually the interesting thing. Sorry, do you want to go on mute? The interesting thing with that particular hadith is that hadith can be used to eradicate female genital cutting, because according to the hadith, there was a woman who was a circumciser called Atiyah, and then the Prophet said, if you're going to do it, cut lightly but do not cut excessively, because that was a practice people used to cut off the clitoris. So that's why if you're using a hadith, you can actually use it to say, no, the Prophet was saying, don't do it. And like you said, we don't to the wives.
That whole hadith,
now,
anything that mentions female circumcision, especially female circumcision, is it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I wouldn't even use it to debunk FGM because it doesn't exist. It's never been authenticated. So I will never lie on my prophets, my God, my book, my hood. I can't do it as a Muslim. And it's scary that people are so confidently able to say, if you don't, there was a sheikh who said, a Somali sheikh who said, anybody who is against FGM or female circumcision is a kafir, is a non-believer. And I was like, what? As if having FGM, you can't cut this. You can't cut this in Islam. You can't dye your hair. So if those two are extreme dislikes of God, why would God create me with a clitoris, full functioning clitoris, a full functioning labia minora, and a full functioning labia majora for human beings to cut? It doesn't make any sense. And I think it's about time we started using our logical thinking.
Yes. So this I was trying to explain is that sorry, yeah, what I was trying to explain is that there are different understandings. Like, okay, either, so do you want to go on mute just for a second? I think I can hear. It's either you reject the hadith altogether, that's fine, or those who think the hadith or believe the hadith to be authentic, they've interpreted it differently. So that's like when you mentioned, like in Singapore, some scholars, they say the prick because the hadith says don't cut like excessively, so they're thinking, okay, so it's like a ritual, like a nick, like, so it's not actually it's not invasive. And then some scholars have interpreted it to mean, oh, okay, you only cut off the excess skin of the labia minora, like the inner lips. And some have thought it meant, no, you cut the external clitoris. So there are different interpretations. And then some have said, no, it's the clitoral hood, not the clitoris itself. You don't touch the clitoris. And that's like the strongest opinion. So it's like what they were doing in Europe and America, like female circumcision. So the practice is now what they call clitoral hoodectomy, where they remove a woman. And this is something, again, it's a choice of labels, because now, I don't know if you're familiar, in America, there's a number of urologists and gynecologists. They're promoting a practice called clitoral hood reduction, and they're talking about its perceived benefits for enhancing women's sexual pleasure. And the reason why they're saying that is because they said that there's some women that, for example, who've got a clitoral hood, that if they don't clean the clitoral hood sufficiently, it can get trapped to the clitoris and it can cause phimosis. So because it can cause phimosis, they're saying that, so either you do like what is called a dorsal cut, where you just cut slightly. This is the medical procedure. This is not Islam. This is now I'm talking about Western medical procedures. So they say either you do like a dorsal cut, where you just cut the clitoral hood so like the clitoris somewhat can breathe, or you remove the clitoral hood itself. And removing that clitoral hood, and again, when it's done in the West, it's called clitoral hood reduction. But my issue with, like, for example, that procedure is exactly the same procedure that some Muslim scholars were saying is female circumcision. Did you understand my point? So that's why it's like it's which, if it's done in the West and it's done in a medical hospital with people in white suits, that's now acceptable. But if it's done in another part of the world, then that all of a sudden is barbaric and it's mutilation. So that's why I'm just like, where's the consistency in this? Did you understand what I'm getting at? So that's why it's so that's also what I'm just trying to understand. The same way like labiaplasty, because if a woman goes to, there's women as young as 9, even in this country, that have undergone labiaplasty, and if a woman feels that my genitalia doesn't look, or I don't feel comfortable with it, then that's a reason to do it. But if a woman, and I'm talking about a woman, I'm not talking about a girl here, if a grown woman were to undergo a similar procedure in West Africa, then that's still called mutilation. So that's where it's just like, okay, why is one, if it's done by a Western person, it's okay, but if it's done by an African woman, I'm not talking about content, so it's not an issue of consent, it's still considered to be FGM. So that's where it's this kind of back and forth that if it's all of them, you know, one should say that it's FGM or cut in and we should eradicate it, or why is it we're allowing for some more than others? But yeah, what are your thoughts on those two things?
I think they all come under the umbrella of FGM. It's that simple. It's like there was a research paper, and I think it's called I don't blame my mother, or I don't blame I think it's my mother. And they questioned a lot of women, and these women basically said that the Western world are hypocrites. And that's the reality. It is hypocrisy. Like it's to say, okay, we're doing labiaplasty, which is type 2 female genital mutilation, type 1 or type 2. They're not sewing together the female, but there are so many procedures that have went horribly wrong. And those women who had labiaplasty are suffering from the same complications as me. And you're telling me it's not the same thing? And another thing I find interesting is it is the same thing, the same reasoning around it, beautifying, decreasing sexual pleasure, resizing, making it, you know, more attractive. And what I found is there was a video on TikTok that ticked a lot of people off, that I reposted or I did a stitch on, where a young girl, she was 15, 16, where she went to the NHS. 15, 16 years old. She went to the NHS and she said, you know, I'm feeling a little discomfort, but mostly she didn't like the way that her vulva looked. So she went to her gynecologist and she says, I want labiaplasty, which is the removal of the, not the clitoris, but the labia minora. And the doctor turned around to this child and said, yeah, I see what you mean. They didn't tell her about why it's required, why it exists, the function it has, you know, the necessity, why it's necessary to leave it. You know, you're too young to be considering this. I don't know, seek therapy. But they said, yeah, we can do it for you. And then they took her to the head of the gynecology department because she was young. And the head of gynecology said, yeah, we can't do it right now because it will be considered female genital mutilation. And they would have faced a prison sentence if they had done it. So they said, come back when you are 18. And that's exactly what she did. It's like an African girl being, where she's in this country, or an Asian girl who's in the UK, and she is still living within her community. She hasn't gotten out of her community. And she has her family members telling her, you know, why do you still have your clitoris? That's disgusting. I don't know, her boyfriend or someone she's talking to says, oh, you know, that don't look right. I like girls from my country who are like this. If they get a phone call from home saying, do you want to come and do the FGM? They will have been pressured so much that they will say, you know what, okay, The same way a woman can have a one-night stand and make a life-altering decision to go and do labiaplasty. It is happening. It is the same thing, the same ideology, the same way of thinking, the same reasoning behind it. And if it goes wrong, and if you live in the UK, there's nothing they can do about it because it's not considered FGM. It is not a crime, so doctors actually get away with mutilating women. And most of them don't know much about the female anatomy. I genuinely believe they think that the vagina is supposed to have like one generic look. It's really unusual. It's really, really unusual.
So what advice would you give? Again, just so there's a young woman, so she's not like underage, so just say a young woman, 24, 25 years old. She has a lot of body image issues in relation to her genitalia. She's got protruding lips. She doesn't think it looks beautiful because it doesn't look like what she's seen in like the medical books, or maybe what she's been exposed to in porn, or maybe a previous partner has said, you know, certain things about the way she looks. What advice would you give to such a woman that you consider undergoing that labor process? What advice would you give?
Don't do it. Embrace your body the way that it is, the same way you embrace other people's bodies the way that they are, and you love and respect, you know, their bodies. Like, for example, you have a partner or a husband. Women are, you know, thought to be, you know, devoted and loving, and they don't necessarily care too much about the way their husband looks. Like, they wouldn't go out of their way to say, yeah, it's, you know, it's a little short, can you go make it longer? Or, you know, I don't like the size, can you go change it? Or can you fix this? Or this is a bit too, you know. I don't see the woman say things like that. But when women experience, you know, people saying that to them, that there's something wrong, and, you know, we already have our own insecurities, but having to hear it from other people as well is that added pressure, you know, of thinking that you need to be perfect, you need to look the way that these people expect you to look. And the reality is, you will not look the same as anybody. You are your own person. Your vagina or your vulva is yours and yours alone. No two are the same, because we are all different human beings. We are all different people. And we need to learn to love our bodies and stop listening to people and what they think and what they believe and what they want to see. Because at the end of the day, if you can't change your penis size for me, I can't change anything for you. And I won't. So, if they have an expectation, just put it on the table. I want this too. If you can't do it, then don't have that same weird expectation of me. Just stand your ground. Be happy with your genitalia, for the love of God.
I think that's a perfect way to end. So honestly, that was brilliant. I think that's what, again, you gave knowledge, you spoke about your experience, but also you gave practical advice, and I think that's exactly what I wanted. But just before we wrap up, can you again just let people know where they can, if they want to contact you, to the work that you do, support the work that you do, and also where people can find out about your genital reconstruction surgery and where they can donate. If you can speak a bit more about that.
Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere if you just type my name. But Instagram and TikTok is usually the two best places. Both platforms have my GoFundMe up on there as well. And, you know, I want to say thank you so much for having this conversation. It's, you know, amazing to always see other people's inputs, because usually, you know, to sit in front of a camera and just put your own opinion out there can be very daunting sometimes. But it's very nice to have, you know, like a back and forth conversation and see where other people's opinions and views lie. So thank you for having me.
Jazakallah khair. We definitely want to support again. Allah continue to bless you. Continue doing it. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to save this again so people hopefully can reshare it and watch it and learn from it. But again, please support Shamsa for the work that she's doing, not just only by following her, but donating to her donating for her fund for her surgery. And again, I'll save this, and I'll thank you, and again where people can kind of to donate. But yeah, thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good evening, and I'll speak to you soon wherever you are. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.